All right, so Clark, thank you for joining us. Just want to talk to you briefly about the panel that you just had. You talked about the research that you worked on disruptive innovation for the last 10, 15 years. And you were telling us about three phases that both the established business and disruptive businesses go through. Can you tell us about that change for the established business and that evolution and why they often fail to adapt?
Yeah, one of the things that's so hard for established businesses in the face of a disruption is in that first phase, the disruption doesn't really even compete with the traditional business. So it's hard to value, it's hard to look at and see how it's going to have an impact. And so all through the first phase of disruption, it's really parallel growth because the disruption and the old established business are not competing against each other. They're reaching different audiences, different markets. Then there's a period of ambiguity where the people from the legacy side of the business have lots of data to suggest that the disruption won't impact them, and they can make that in a very compelling way. And sometimes there's even a run-up in success and revenue during that period. But it's often then followed by the phase 3 of disruption, which is the long, steady decline. But even in that phase, the incumbent firm usually stays around. It's just that the disruption's taken so much growth out of it. And one of our questions is, how do you keep the legacy business viable and strong in that phase 3? And that's some of the things we talked about today on the session.
You come from an interesting perspective because you were working at Harvard Business School doing this research, but now you're CEO of a media company at Salt Lake. And can you tell us a little bit about how in that position you've adopted those practices? And you mentioned a couple of examples of companies, of established companies who actually made it through that survived the disruptive innovation. Can you tell us about what you're doing and those companies have done?
Yeah, first of all, it's always easier to talk about it, write about it, and put it in PowerPoints than actually do it. I miss the days of just having to present PowerPoints. Quarterly earnings and growth results are much harder to deliver. The thing is, there is a path to making it through, and it's a very clear path, and you can look across the industry and see people who are doing really well. The thing is that's hard for a lot of incumbents to understand, though, is the ones who are doing really well follow a very consistent pattern. They have a separate group, they've built new DNA, they've hired people for the digital disruption. They still invest in their traditional brands, but they've adapted them for a post-disruptive environment. You look at what The Atlantic has done, which is phenomenal. I mean, that magazine is strong, the circulation's actually growing. But it's not what they're doing at Atlantic.com, which is a very different model and DNA, and let alone the Atlantic Wire. And 3 different organizations, 3 different sets of DNA, but one unifying brand architecture. Same thing's true at Forbes. If you look at the magazine versus Forbes.com, they set up a separate group, and they've had such phenomenal growth and a lot of discovery. So for us, we have a unifying brand architecture, which is built around family and faith. We want to be known for family the way the Washington Post is known for politics. But we have different application of that brand architecture in our newspaper, in our national edition of the Deseret News, in our website, and in some of our other properties that aren't tied to our news website. But all are unified under that common brand architecture around rigorous, well-researched, family-oriented journalism.
Wonderful. Clark, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you very much.